The crackle of flames danced in the night air, their flickering glow lighting up Captain Jack Sullivan's backyard. His fire pit, a simple steel ring lined with neatly stacked stones, radiated warmth as Jack leaned back in his lawn chair, sipping a cold beer. It was one of those rare, peaceful nights, a welcome break from the relentless pace of station life. The air carried a faint scent of pine smoke, and the soft pop of burning wood broke the stillness. He tossed another marshmallow to his Labrador, Scout, who caught it midair with a happy wag of his tail. This was exactly what Jack needed, a quiet evening under the stars. Then came the sirens. Jack sat up straight as flashing red lights bounced off the fence. The distant roar of engines grew louder, closing in fast. He stood, beer still in hand, eyes narrowing as a fire truck screeched around the corner. His fire truck, the ladder engine he commanded at Station 19, barreled down the street, headlights cutting through the dark like a spotlight. His heart skipped a beat. Something awful must have happened. But then the truck swerved into his driveway. Before Jack could process it, four firefighters jumped out in full gear. One of them, a jittery rookie named Tim, shouted, "Cap's house is on fire." Jack stood by his fire pit, dumbfounded. "What?" he called out. "What are you talking about?" Tim pointed at him like he'd caught a thief red-handed. "Back away from the flames." It took Jack a moment to catch on. His own crew, his own team, was responding to a fire call at his house. He glanced at the pit. Flames flickered calmly inside the steel ring, smoke drifting lazily upward, well away from anything flammable. Textbook fire safety. But before he could explain, the crew was already unrolling hoses and charging toward his backyard like it was a five-alarm blaze. "Tim, it's just a fire pit," Jack yelled, waving his arms. "It's under control." Lieutenant Sarah, his no-nonsense second-in-command, marched up, clipboard in hand. She wasn't one for games, and her expression was dead serious. "Jack," she said gravely, "we got a 911 call about an uncontrolled fire on your property." "That's ridiculous," Jack protested. "I've been right here the whole time." Sarah's eyes flicked to the fire pit. "You know how this looks," she said. "We've been getting calls about backyard fires all month. People are jumpy, some are just nosy." Jack muttered, "Busybodies," and followed her gaze across the street. There, perfectly framed in her living room window, stood Linda Carter, arms crossed, a smug little smile on her lips. She gave him a wave before turning away. "Are you kidding me?" Jack growled. "Linda called this in." Sarah sighed. "Look, we've got to document it all." She started scribbling notes, standard procedure. "I know the drill," Jack grumbled. "I wrote half the damn rulebook." Meanwhile, Tim was still poised like he was about to tackle the fire pit. "Stand down," Jack barked. "I've got this handled." "Cap," Tim replied nervously. "We still got to check for hot spots." Jack dragged a hand down his face, fighting the urge to laugh or yell. He wasn't sure which. "Fine," he muttered. "Check the hot spots." Tim approached the fire pit with a thermal scanner, his face set in fierce concentration. After a few seconds, he announced, "No hot spots detected." "I could have told you that," Jack said under his breath, "because it's a fire pit." The next morning, Jack woke to a text from his cousin, a forwarded social media post. It read, "Local fire captain sparks danger in his own backyard, community at risk." Attached was a blurry photo of Jack, beer in hand, standing by his pit as the fire truck rolled in. The comments were brutal. Strangers mocked him, called him reckless. Some demanded he step down. One stinging remark accused him of hypocrisy, leading first responders while endangering his own neighborhood. Jack tossed his phone aside, but a knot of anxiety tightened in his gut. He'd spent years earning his community's trust, pushing fire safety. Now it felt like it was slipping away overnight. Later that afternoon, he ran into Linda in the grocery store parking lot. She stood by her SUV, arms folded, that same smug look plastered on her face. "Enjoy your little stunt last night?" Jack asked, forcing a calm tone. "I was protecting the neighborhood," Linda snapped. "I know a fire hazard when I see one." "It was a fire pit," Jack said slowly, like he was explaining it to a kid, with a 10-foot clearance on non-combustible ground. "You know, like the fire code says." Linda's smile widened. "If you're so innocent, you wouldn't be all over the internet." "Oh, come on," Jack scoffed. "You know that post was nonsense." Linda stepped closer, lowering her voice. We'll see what City Hall thinks. They're already asking questions. You filed a complaint? Jack asked, incredulous. Seriously? Linda shrugged. I take neighborhood safety seriously. Maybe next time you'll think twice before putting lives at risk. Back at the station, things weren't much better. Fire Marshal Ed Brooks showed up, a stern investigator known for sniffing out even the smallest infractions. He leaned back in Jack's office chair, flipping through a clipboard of forms. Captain Sullivan, Ed said flatly, we've had several reports about your leadership lately. Last night's call isn't the first complaint. From who? Jack asked, though he could guess. Can't say, Ed replied. But City Hall wants this reviewed. Public confidence is shaky. Shaky, Jack repeated, stunned. I was roasting marshmallows. Ed leaned forward. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality. We're starting an inquiry. For now, you're under review. Hours later, alone in his office, Jack's longtime friend Mike, a fellow firefighter, poked his head in. Rough day? Mike asked, stepping inside. Linda's out to bury me, Jack muttered. Well, Mike said with a grin. Maybe she's got a crush on you. All that pent-up energy. Jack snorted. Yeah, sure. But Mike's face turned serious. You should know something, he said quietly. I heard Linda's been whispering around City Hall for weeks. Someone's pulling strings against you. That woman's unhinged, Jack groaned. She's going to get someone hurt just to prove a point. You think this is just about fire safety? Mike asked. Feels bigger than that. As Jack stared into the empty station garage, the weight of it hit him. Linda wasn't just stirring drama. She was out for blood. If she had allies at City Hall, things could get ugly fast. That evening, sitting by his fire pit again, Jack couldn't help but glance at Linda's house. Her living room light flicked on, and for a split second, he thought he saw her staring back. Let's see what you've really got up your sleeve, he muttered to himself. The morning after the fire pit debacle, Jack Sullivan stood in his driveway, arms crossed, staring at the charred remains of a marshmallow skewer that had somehow survived the chaos. It wasn't the wood that had burned, it was his reputation. His own crew had rolled up to his house like he was some reckless amateur. Worse, his name was being dragged online, painting him as a fool. Linda Carter's smug face stuck in his mind. This wasn't just an overreaction. She was plotting something. Mike pulled into the driveway, stepping out of his beat-up truck with 2 coffees in hand. Figured you'd need this, Mike said, handing one over. You look like you fought a grizzly last night. I'd rather fight a grizzly than deal with Linda Carter, Jack muttered. You know, Mike said, sipping his coffee. I don't think she's just being a thorn in your side. Something's off. Word around town is she's been stirring trouble at City Hall. What did you hear? Jack asked. I asked a buddy in records, Mike said. Turns out Linda's nephew, Ryan Carter, flunked the firefighter exam a couple years back. Guess who failed him on the safety protocols? Jack blinked. Wait, that was me. The kid was a mess. Nearly dumped live embers on propane tanks. I couldn't pass him. Well, Mike said, Linda's been holding a grudge ever since. She's been filing complaints about you for months. Last night was her chance to make it public. Jack's stomach churned. This wasn't just Linda being nosy, it was personal. And if she had sway at City Hall, she could do real damage. By noon, Fire Marshal Ed called Jack in for an urgent meeting. Ed arrived at the station with his usual stone-cold demeanor. We've got a problem, Ed began. City Hall's been getting complaints about your leadership. I heard, Jack said flatly. It's worse now, Ed continued. Linda Carter's been hounding them, claiming you've ignored fire safety violations and botched last night's call. Botched? Jack snapped. It was a fire pit, 10 feet from anything flammable. By the book. Doesn't matter, Ed said firmly. The mayor's office wants you written up. If I don't give them something, they'll launch a full investigation. You've got to be joking, Jack muttered, pacing. You really think I'm endangering my own neighborhood? I don't, Ed admitted, but politics don't care. Linda's got someone in her corner, and they're looking for a scapegoat. Great, Jack said. So what do I do? Sit back and let Linda tank my career? Not quite, Ed replied. There's been a spike in emergency calls around your neighborhood lately. False alarms, weird stuff like smoke sightings with no source. City Hall thinks someone's trying to make your area look unsafe. Jack stared at him. You think Linda's behind that too? I don't know, Ed said. But if you want to save your name, you'd better find out. That night, Jack and Mike sat in Jack's garage, poring over notes and old reports. Incident logs, safety checklists, and Linda's complaint timeline spread across the desk. A pattern emerged. Each fake emergency targeted Jack's neighborhood, just enough to stir panic, but never anything concrete. "She's playing games," Jack muttered, "creating chaos to make me look bad." "You think she's making the calls herself?" Mike asked. "Maybe," Jack said. "Or she's got someone else convinced I'm the problem." As if on cue, a faint blue flicker danced through the garage window. Jack stood and peered out. Across the street, Linda's living room glowed from her TV. Through the window, he saw her pacing, phone in hand, a smug grin on her face. "She's up to something," Jack muttered. Mike chuckled. "What? You gonna stake out her house all night?" "Actually," Jack said, narrowing his eyes, "that's not a bad idea." The next night, Jack parked a block from Linda's house, tucked in the shadows of an old oak tree. Notebook in his lap, thermos of coffee beside him, he watched. Linda's house stayed quiet for hours. Just as he was about to give up, a shadow moved across her driveway. A stocky man in a dark hoodie slipped out from her side gate, carrying a bundle of wires. He glanced around, then vanished down the alley. Jack leapt from his truck, phone in hand, dialing Mike. "Get to Linda's now," he said. "I think I just spotted her accomplice." By the time Mike arrived, the man was gone, but in Linda's backyard, they found proof: discarded wires, charred rags, and an empty smoke bomb box. "She's staging fake emergencies," Jack muttered. "Planting this stuff to keep us running in circles." The next morning, Jack stormed into Ed's office with the evidence. Ed's stern face softened as he sifted through the photos. "This is what I needed," Ed said. "I'll take it to City Hall. If Linda's behind this, she's finished." Hours later, Ed called back. "Good news," he said. "Linda's exposed." Her contact at City Hall admitted they were feeding her info to keep you under fire. They're facing their own investigation now. Relief washed over Jack, but Ed's tone darkened. "One more thing," he said. "Linda's nephew, Ryan, the one who failed the exam. He's been seen around an abandoned lot near your block. Word is he's messing with homemade fireworks and smoke devices." Jack's stomach tightened. If that kid's playing with fire, this could turn bad fast. "Then you'd better be ready, Captain," Ed said grimly. "Something tells me this isn't over." Jack Sullivan couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Linda Carter's schemes had unraveled, but her nephew Ryan lingered in his thoughts. The kid had always been careless. Failing the firefighter exam wasn't a fluke, it was a pattern. If Ryan was tinkering with fireworks and smoke bombs, things could escalate quickly. Late that afternoon, Jack cruised the neighborhood, eyes peeled for trouble. The abandoned lot 2 blocks down was a known hotspot for mischief: overgrown weeds, shattered windows, and a faint whiff of old smoke. As he turned the corner, he spotted Ryan's rusty pickup parked near the chain-link fence. Jack slowed, watching as Ryan and another guy unloaded a box from the truck bed. Ryan glanced around nervously before darting toward the lot's crumbling garage. The second man followed, clutching a tangle of wires and cardboard tubes. Jack's pulse quickened. This wasn't just kids fooling around. Ryan was up to something serious. He parked down the street and called Mike. "I need backup," Jack said quietly. "Ryan's at the old warehouse, messing with something flammable." "On my way," Mike replied. Minutes dragged as Jack watched Ryan and his friend disappear deeper into the property. He resisted the urge to charge in alone. Rushing without backup could backfire. Suddenly, smoke wisped from the garage roof, a faint gray curl that darkened fast. Jack's stomach dropped. Whatever they were doing, it was spiraling out of control. By the time Mike arrived, the smoke was thick, and flames flickered at the garage windows. The fire was spreading. Jack bolted toward the lot, Mike right behind. They reached the garage door as Ryan stumbled out, coughing and wild-eyed. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Ryan wheezed. "We were just testing. Where's your friend?" Jack cut in sharply. "He's still inside," Ryan gasped. He went back for the box. Without hesitating, Jack yanked open the half-melted door and plunged into the smoke. The air stung his eyes and throat as flames licked the walls, feeding on piles of junk. In the corner, Ryan's friend, a scrawny teen with soot-streaked hands, struggled to drag a metal box from the fire. "Forget the box," Jack barked. "Let go." The kid froze, torn between panic and defiance. Before Jack could reach him, A flash erupted, a pocket of heat igniting above. A beam groaned, sagging under the strain. "Move!" Jack shouted. The boy bolted for the exit just as the beam collapsed, sending burning debris crashing down. Jack dodged narrowly, staggering outside where Mike pulled him clear. Moments later, the flames roared through the garage roof, black smoke swirling into the sky. "You okay?" Mike asked. "Fine," Jack rasped, coughing. He turned to Ryan and his friend. "What the hell were you thinking?" Ryan's face was ashen. "It wasn't supposed to catch fire," he stammered. "We were testing a smoke bomb." "A smoke bomb?" Jack said, incredulous. "In a dry, abandoned building?" Ryan swallowed hard, guilt in his eyes. "Linda told me, if we could stage one last scare, she could force another audit. She said it was about getting back at you. It wasn't supposed to be a real fire." Jack stared, stunned. Linda hadn't just filed complaints. She'd pushed Ryan into dangerous stunts. The fire department arrived minutes later, sirens blaring as engines screeched to a halt. Jack's crew leapt into action, dousing the blaze before it spread beyond the lot. Sarah spotted Jack by the fence and strode over. "You okay?" she asked. "I'll live," Jack said, voice hoarse. "Ryan and his buddy here thought they'd play with fire to make me look bad." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "That explains a lot. We've been chasing smoke calls around here for weeks." "It's worse," Jack said grimly. "Linda's been behind it all, using Ryan to stage emergencies." Hours later, back at the station, Jack sat in his office, piecing it together. Linda had crossed a line, putting her nephew in harm's way for revenge. City Hall would sort it out now. The truth was out. The next day, Jack confronted Linda outside her house. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, her usual smugness replaced by a cold edge. "Your nephew could have died," Jack said, voice low and firm. Linda barely flinched. "Ryan knew what he was doing," she said flatly. "He was terrified," Jack shot back. "He nearly got himself killed trying to please you. You put him in danger just to smear me. You humiliated my family," Linda spat. "Ryan should have been a firefighter, but you failed him. I had to show people what kind of leader you are." "You mean the kind who keeps people safe?" Jack snapped. "Last night, I pulled your nephew out of a burning building. Not you, not your City Hall buddy me." Linda's face twisted, her confidence cracking. Her voice faltered. "I just wanted him to get a fair shot." "You nearly cost him his life," Jack said. "That's not how you fix things." For a moment, Linda was silent. Then, without a word, she turned and slammed the door behind her. By week's end, the fallout hit hard. Ryan and his friend faced reckless endangerment charges, though the judge went easy given the circumstances. Linda's role came to light, earning her a City Hall reprimand. Her contact in the mayor's office resigned amid the scandal. Despite it all, Jack felt a twinge of sympathy for Ryan. The kid had been used, pushed by someone he trusted. As much as he'd messed up, Jack hoped Ryan could still find his way. On a quiet Friday night, Jack lit his fire pit again. The flames flickered steadily, the warmth soothing after weeks of turmoil. Scout snoozed by his side. For the first time in ages, Jack felt at peace. Linda's house across the street was dark. He doubted she'd stir trouble anytime soon. Leaning back, he muttered to Scout with a grin. "Next time, we're roasting marshmallows inside." The fire crackled in quiet agreement, and Jack let the calm settle over him. The warehouse fire stuck with Jack Sullivan for days. The danger Ryan had courted and Linda's twisted revenge plot left a tension he couldn't shake. He'd seen how desperation could drive people to reckless choices, but Linda letting her pride endanger Ryan hit harder. The fire pit mess faded from the news fast. City Hall dropped their inquiry after Ed presented the evidence. Ryan and his friend got community service and mandatory fire safety classes, a fitting penalty, Jack thought. Linda went quiet. No more dog walks, no more petty calls. Jack wondered if she was too embarrassed to face the neighbors she'd deceived or just biding her time. One evening, as Jack started to think the storm had passed, his doorbell rang. To his shock, Linda stood there, holding a plate of cookies. She looked worn, her usual bravado gone. "I thought I should say something," she said softly. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I owe you an apology." Jack leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're right about that." Linda shifted, clutching the plate like a lifeline. "I know I went too far," she said. "I thought I was helping Ryan. But I see now I was just trying to control everything. You were right. He wasn't ready to be a firefighter. Instead of helping him grow, I pushed him to blame you. Jack studied her, looking for any hint of a lie. She seemed sincere, stripped of the arrogance that once defined her. I don't know what I was thinking, Linda went on. I let my pride take over. I thought if I pushed hard enough, I could force things to go my way. You nearly got Ryan killed, Jack said, calm but firm. I know, Linda said, eyes dropping. I'll never forgive myself for that. But I hope you can forgive me. Jack exhaled, his anger easing slightly. It's not me you need to make things right with, he said. It's Ryan. He doesn't need puppet strings. He needs to figure out who he is. Linda nodded. I'm trying. He's been staying with me since the fire. I've been helping him get on track. He's volunteering at a youth center now, wants to teach kids about safety. Maybe he's finally learning. That's a start, Jack said. Linda hesitated, offering the plate. I brought cookies. Homemade. I know it doesn't fix anything, but Jack chuckled despite himself. Homemade, huh? Should I call the station just in case? Linda laughed, a real laugh that surprised them both. I deserve that, she said. You're not wrong, Jack replied, taking the plate. Thanks for stopping by. Linda turned to leave, but paused. By the way, she said over her shoulder, I wasn't just being a pain before. My house had a fire once, years ago, when I was a kid. Small, kitchen thing. My dad put it out, but I had nightmares about it for years. Even now, I sometimes wake up thinking I smell smoke. Jack frowned. I didn't know that. No reason you would, Linda said quietly. I guess I let it get the best of me. But I'm working on it. As she walked off, Jack stood there, cookies in hand, piecing it together. Linda's obsession wasn't just spite. It was fear buried deep. That weekend, Jack hosted a small cookout. Burgers, chairs, and the fire pit, nothing fancy. To his surprise, Linda and Ryan showed up, looking uneasy. Ryan hung back, hands in his pockets, but Jack welcomed them warmly. Linda stayed quiet at first, but eventually joined the neighbors by the fire. Later, Ryan approached Jack. I'm sorry, he said awkwardly. For everything. I know I screwed up. You did, Jack said honestly. But screwing up isn't what defines you. What you do next is. Ryan nodded, taking it in. I want to make it right. I've been thinking about joining the volunteer fire department to learn the right way this time. Good plan, Jack said, smiling faintly. Just remember, it's not about proving anything. It's about being ready when someone needs you. As the fire pit glowed, the neighborhood's tension melted away. Linda chatted quietly with Sarah, Mike cracked jokes by the grill, Scout sprawled at his feet. Jack leaned back, breathing in the night air. He glanced at Linda, who gave him a small nod, a silent truce. He nodded back. They weren't friends yet, but maybe they could be someday. As the last guest drifted home, Linda and Ryan lingered. Before leaving, Linda turned back with a faint smile. Nice fire pit, she said. Looks safe enough. Jack grinned. Figured I'd finally get it right. Alone by the fire, Scout at his side, Jack watched the flames dance. Just you and me, bud, he muttered, scratching the dog's ears. And no one's calling the station this time. The fire crackled softly, and Jack smiled, letting the warmth wash away the last of the chaos. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, and safe, just how he liked it.